Company also announcing plans to invest $75 billion in CapEx this year. That's a big revision above street forecasts. This is what the CFO had to say about that spending strategy on the earnings call last night.
As we expand our AI efforts, we expect to increase our investments in capital expenditure for technical infrastructure, primarily for servers, followed by data centers and networking. We expect to invest approximately $75 billion in CapEx in 2025, with approximately $16 billion to $18 billion of that in the first quarter. The expected total investment level may fluctuate from quarter to quarter, primarily due to timing of deliveries and construction schedules.
Jim, that's about a 30% revision higher. Meta's was only 20% revision higher.
You're listening to the call and you're thinking, well, okay, it's pretty good. And a lot of good stuff here. YouTube is really strong and there's a lot of profit, a lot of money being made YouTube. And you get very excited. And then they just drop a total bombshell about how much they need to buy. And David, when I'm listening to it, I'm saying to myself, well, what happened to DeepSeek? I thought we all were supposed to be cut. Did we all just get had on the DeepSeek story?
Well, Jevin didn't get had. He knew. He knew. The 1865 economist back in Great Britain.
Yes,
we were talking about a lot last week, Jevin's paradox.
Yes,
because listen,
did.
I don't think any of us expected, and I think we said this last week, when we got the commentary from many of these companies that they would suddenly reverse their CapEx in some way. But I think what perhaps is a bit more surprising is the increases. You mentioned Meta's, which occurred on Friday, I believe it was, 60 to 65 billion. Microsoft, at least 80, probably 85 billion. Some say will go as high as 90 billion this year. And then you just referred to that significant increase in CapEx from Alphabet to 75 billion. The numbers are stunning, obviously, and they all point to potentially an overreaction, I guess some would argue, in what happened to NVIDIA's stock price. I would add to that, Jim, that Alphabet shares are going to be down in part because of the deceleration of the growth rate of cloud. 30%, yes, still a very strong number, but not as strong as it had been. But what do you make of the comments on the call when the CFO said the cloud miss is due to being supply constrained? More demand than available capacity. Doesn't that say good things for NVIDIA?
Yes, it does. It says great things. Now, what people are still concerned about is, if you notice in their verbiage, that they're going to be the first to sell Blackwell. Well, wait a second. I thought Blackwell was selling like mad. So that was a pause. Second, we have one more in this gauntlet. Will Amazon say that they're going to pause? Why didn't Alphabet say, you know what, we're in light of DeepSeek, we're going to maybe pause our spend? But they couldn't, because they're an honest company, and Ashkenazi, who's the CFO, is not going to let them do that. I mean, Carl, we sold down NVIDIA because of a belief that you didn't need all this CapEx. So far, everyone has said they do. Amazon's the one that has the most that they're working on that's away from NVIDIA. But if Amazon says, you know what, we're going to need to do CapEx, then NVIDIA's going to go up rather dramatically.
Yeah, Amazon's going to be key Thursday night. Citi today, though, does trim NVIDIA to 163.
I saw that.
They point out it's been flat since June.
Right. I mean, I read through that, and I said to the guys, I said to Jeff Marks and Ben Stoto, all right, here they go. Here come the downgrades. But the downgrades seemed almost out of sync. It really was much more of like, all right, this thing's not moving, so like, let's get away from it. It was not substantive. The only substantive thing I really found was that I keep thinking that Blackwell, which is the next iteration, is selling like mad. And to have the first customer learn that the first customer is finally taking it tells me that it's going to be much more forward and not now in front of us. But it's going to happen because obviously if you're spending all this money, you're going to get Blackwell. So then you say to yourself, why do you need Blackwell? Why do you need this incredibly important platform that has software? Well, you need it for both inference and you need it for training. There are people who said with DeepSeek you don't. Now, there's an outfit that I've been dealing with called you.com, and that's not Hugh Johnson, it's you.com. I really like you.com. And it's one of those companies that is really ahead of DeepSeek. It's way ahead. So I said, oh my God, this is going to hurt NVIDIA. And he said, well, no, actually, they're our largest investor. So, I mean, once again, you just find this. The long knives came out, whether it be China, whether it be Biden, whether it be these big hyperscalers that said, listen, we don't want NVIDIA, or we want to scale back in NVIDIA. And then something happened which just said, you know, I guess we can't. And then, you know, AMD didn't help the case.
Yep.
Because AMD did not do well last
No,
night.
on data center in particular, those shares are looking down a bit.
Yes,
the numbers did come in
And there we
below
get a
at
full
least
downgrade out of Citi today.
what
Yeah,
the
that
street
Citi downgrade
was
was
estimating
subsidy.
on data center for AMD. But I mean, just back to the bigger picture that we talk
Sure.
about often in terms of the incredible growth of data centers overall. I did think it was interesting in some of the commentary on the call from Alphabet, among the world's most efficient infrastructure as well. Google's data centers deliver nearly 4 times more computing power per unit of electricity compared to just 5 years ago, Jim. And yet the numbers just keep going like that.
No, they
Power
do.
consumption, everything else. And even with DeepSeek and the efficiencies that they may have come up with in some way, nobody's pulling back on saying, great, but we need more and more powerful chips, and we need even more electricity.
No one's saying it. I keep hoping that the glass replaces copper. That some people want to do that. I keep hoping that cryogenics from Dover replaces just the typical cooling product or water cooling product. Dover has to scale. The copper movement to glass is a very nascent one, actually led by a woman who's from NVIDIA. So I keep coming back to, well, NVIDIA's figured this out. But people want a price break from NVIDIA. They do. And maybe a lot of this was, okay, Jensen Huang, while you're off there in the Lunar New Year meeting the president, we need a better deal because this thing's rumored to be $35,000. It's not a chip. We keep using the term chip. It's a platform with software. That was another thing that people were missed on DeepSeek. Platform with software, they can charge more, and you can use the current plug it into the software.
Well,
but
I mean, if everybody needs it, then why cut the price? There's no real
Right.
competitors.
Well,
and they all seem determined to just increase their compute capacity as much as they can. I mean, again, back to sort of the commentary.
Right.
Alphabet's cloud customers consume more than 8 times the compute capacity for training and inferencing compared to just a year and a half ago. 8 times?
No, I mean, look, when I talked with Jensen about Blackwell, I mean, Blackwell is video. I know that I talk too much about robots, and I know that. But if everyone gets a robot, which is the vision of the guy who runs Doge, then we would all need a lot of NVIDIA power, because NVIDIA has robots that don't walk into walls and aren't stupid. Let's go back to rewind the tape about why we liked NVIDIA so much. They were so far ahead of everybody else. Well, what happened? We found out that AMD has fallen behind. We found out the hyperscalers tended to need more than they got. We did get a DeepSeek story out of China, which said that they didn't spend a lot to be able to develop this product, which I think has now been proven to be false. That's not just a Peter Navarro narrative, an anti-China narrative. There was a sense that maybe the Chinese lied.
I don't know, Jim, on that one.
I don't
I've
know
also
either.
heard the other story, which is, well, it's actually very close in terms of what they actually spent to what is spent to train models here
Right, we
as
get
well,
that.
that the differential is not that great.
Right. Okay.
So,
differential not that
yeah.
great. That's a better way to put it. I mean,
We also, Scott, have NVIDIA up today. This, to me, smells a little bit more like NVIDIA is winning and AMD is struggling at the time when there's this gold rush to, big investment spend. And their shares were already down, 33% over the past year?
Well, and the problem for NVIDIA is it's nearly in bear market territory. So maybe up a little bit today.
I meant
thanks
AMD.
to AMD's
Yeah.
weakness, but it's still down a bunch.
Right. AMD is down, I think, significantly over the past year, while NVIDIA is up even today. So if that was a read through to the whole industry, you'd think, well, then they're selling off. Instead, Jeremy, it seems like they're sitting in the prime position here.
Yeah, I think the market's picking a winner. Right. And they're saying that NVIDIA, if 75 billion is accurate, again, because these are guidance and forecasts, and we've seen this movie before, right, is that Mark Zuckerberg during the metaverse area couldn't talk about enough how much CapEx they were going to spend. And then once it started to get hit into the stock, boy, that number changed really fast. And so those numbers are just guidance numbers that, hey, what we could expect. Those numbers could get, if DeepSeek ends up being something where there's efficiencies to be made, those numbers, the CapEx numbers, are going to come down pretty fast. So I think from NVIDIA, AMD point of view, I think they're just picking a winner and saying AMD is not gaining share against NVIDIA. NVIDIA is maintaining a lead, and the companies that are buying those chips are still saying they're buying them.
So we got Zeus, which would have to be NVIDIA. And of course, the wheels came off or started to get wobbly here with DeepSeek rather. There's a lot of folks who've been saying that the Mag 7 was going to falter for the last year or so, and everyone now trying to jump on a bandwagon. Is DeepSeek the thing that's going to hurt these companies? Have you changed your modeling?
Well, remember, Charles, I've been talking about since the middle of the year of last year that I expected an AI digestion phase in 2025 by the time we get to the middle of it. And if you pull up a chart of NVIDIA, you can see that the stock's actually down from where it was in the middle of last year. And so DeepSeek, what it does is it cuts the cost to produce 1 unit of output from an AI model by like 80%. And I think that's part of the reason you're seeing companies like Microsoft or Google missing their revenue forecasts. Now, what everybody's latching onto today, which is why you're seeing whether it's NVIDIA or the other AI-related names up, is that despite these companies missing, like Google today, they're taking up their CapEx forecasts.
Right.
Well, that can only continue for so long. At a certain point, you're going to want to see revenues being generated. And right now, your viewers should ask themselves, how many of them are using AI on a PC or on a smartphone? If they're not, then you have an issue, because that's ultimately where all of this CapEx has to show up in terms of us adopting it. And it's much like after the internet, where you went through this digestion phase for 2.5 years, NASDAQ went down 78%, and it was an absolute crushing, even though the internet was continuing to grow. So for NVIDIA, the short version is CapEx digestion phase this year. I think by the end of the decade, the revenues will double again from where they are today on a quarterly basis. But it does not mean that you're not going to go through this period where costs are drawing a ton for pre-training and training, but none of us are really using, or the world's not using, killer AI applications. And until that comes out, inference spending is not going to take off to offset the drop.
The argument everyone's making is that, okay, listen, it's great, but it can't go on. It's almost over. The next phase of AI moves past the chips, past the picks and shovels, and it's time to start looking for names that are doing well with the AI technology, like a Meta. How much do you buy into that, and when does that have to show up in your portfolio? Because you still like the hardware names.
Absolutely, Charles. So as long as you're seeing surprises to the upside on the CapEx side, there's going to be surprises in earnings on the hardware place. So we like hardware still here. We think there is a lot of opportunity.
So you like NVIDIA more today than you liked it yesterday?
Absolutely, especially after the CapEx announcement from Google, right? So I think as long as you see dollars flowing, you want to be there. You also do want to be on the application side as well, right? So that's in much earlier innings. Companies screen a lot more expensive here, so it's a little more speculative, but we do expect a lot of upside there as well.
Anything that you're concerned about from a policy perspective? DeepSeek came out. Some countries have put it off. Some agencies like the Navy here. President Trump talked out loud, perhaps, of maybe limiting the amount of chips that we can sell to China. Any of that stuff a worry for you long term, even though, or if it even happened, would it just be a short-term hiccup?
Well, I think right now we're viewing it more as a short-term hiccup. However, depending on how the U.S. positions itself in the long run, it could have long-term implications as well. So I do think NVIDIA being restricted from the Chinese market long-term, that is a problem and limits the upside opportunity for NVIDIA. However, we still have a long way to go from here.
Long way to go. Hang in there. All right, great.
And it's given even more room to NVIDIA to run with that AI crown. Speaking of NVIDIA, you mentioned it, shares up on that $75 billion promise from Alphabet. Separately, DigiTimes is reporting that advanced packaging capacity at Taiwan Semi is improving, and that should help ease any supply chain issues with NVIDIA's chips. And lastly, Supermicro says they are in full production of NVIDIA Blackwell racks. That's GPUs, CPUs, liquid cooling, another way to ease NVIDIA's supply constraints. So those are all just catalysts as to why you're seeing the stock up 4.5%. And Supermicro up, over 9% too.
You mentioned NVIDIA. How are you reconciling this DeepSeek news in your own mind as it relates to the stock? What you think it's worth? Are you as resolute in that belief as you were pre-DeepSeek news?
Well, DeepSeek, definitely was a shot across the bow for, American tech. And I would say most of all to a name like OpenAI, because it really sort of put it under scrutiny. It's not enough just to raise billions of dollars from venture capitalists who have an endless checkbook and just think that you can spend, and you're going to have the best models. I think what DeepSeek showed is that ingenuity and kind of necessity being the mother of invention, and how you optimize your different algorithms to get the most out of your software can mean just as much as the NVIDIA chips themselves. So I think I saw more of a threat to the big LLMs, Anthropic and such. But for NVIDIA is such a poster child for AI in general, and so we have the double ETFs, the triple ETFs. So it just was such a shocker that it really took it down. I stuck with it because I believed it was overdone, and despite the fact that we have to work smarter at how we build these models, I don't think there's anybody who's going to pass on the opportunity to get their hands on some Blackwell chips or Rubin chips next year if they have the opportunity. So I think the order book for NVIDIA is going to show to be really strong. We've seen that with the Google CapEx guide and the Microsoft CapEx guide. So I expect NVIDIA to be just fine.
All right, I hope you're all doing great today. The S&P finished the day about 0.4% higher, and NVIDIA had a nice day today, finishing about 5.2% higher. This is after Alphabet reported earnings yesterday and announced their 2025 CapEx guidance. Alphabet guided for 2025 CapEx of $75 billion, which is much higher than the roughly $59.7 billion that was expected. This is very good news for NVIDIA, as they will be the recipient of a large portion of that CapEx. Now about DeepSeek. I don't want to be redundant, and so I'll just briefly summarize my view of the situation really quick in case you've missed the videos I've posted recently. I do not think that DeepSeek is a problem for NVIDIA, and I actually think that DeepSeek will be a good thing for NVIDIA in the long run. As Semi-Analysis said in their report, they think DeepSeek had a much larger budget than $6 million, and they think DeepSeek has access to about 50,000 NVIDIA Hopper GPUs. If this is correct, then that would mean that DeepSeek is not at all a problem for NVIDIA, and the recent sell-off in NVIDIA stock was an unjustified overreaction. And as Semi-Analysis mentioned in their report, it appears that DeepSeek's models have actually been inducing demand for NVIDIA's products rather than diminishing it. That's a brief summary of my current view on DeepSeek. Now looking ahead, we have Amazon earnings this Thursday, February 6th after market close. All eyes will be on their CapEx guidance. If Amazon reaffirms their commitment to spending massive amounts of money on AI CapEx, then we will have once again gotten through another earnings season with all of the hyperscalers reaffirming their commitments to spend massive amounts of capital on AI infrastructure, and that would of course be great for NVIDIA. We'll see what happens with Amazon earnings Thursday after market close. Looking ahead, we have NVIDIA earnings scheduled for February 26th and NVIDIA's GTC March 17th through the 21st. I seriously think GTC is likely to be more of a market-moving event than CES was. CES was geared toward consumers, whereas GTC is where we should get news about NVIDIA's products in the data center, which is where NVIDIA makes the majority of their revenue. We may learn more about Rubin, and we may even learn more about the next generation after Rubin. Overall, I'm optimistic as Blackwell ramps in volume, and as the hyperscalers that have reported earnings thus far have all increased their CapEx guidance. Be prepared in the days ahead in case we get news about chip tariffs or tariffs on Taiwan. If news breaks about the specific details of the chip tariffs, then that could put some short-term pressure on NVIDIA stock. Overall, though, I'm optimistic as Blackwell production is starting to ramp in volume, and as we have both NVIDIA earnings and GTC on the horizon. With all of that being said, I hope you all have a great rest of the day, and I'm curious to hear your thoughts about NVIDIA in the comments below. Please leave a like on this video so more people will see it. And while you're down there, please consider subscribing. It's free, and you can always change your mind. Thanks for watching, and hopefully I'll see you in the next video.